So, is this our musical episode? Do we have to sing?
Do we have to sing the entire time?
Yes.
Once More with Feeling. That was the Buffy one?
Yes.
Sweet.
I'm not going to do that.
I'm excited that we're doing a musical episode.
Yes. An episode about musicals, not us.
Not us singing, which is too bad. I was looking forward to singing all night. That's going to be like the Mr. Rogers opera musical if I just recitativo all of my dialogue for the next hour. I'm excited to talk about musicals. I did not know you were a musicals guy.
So I am a, shall we say, a casualty of having a family that loves musicals. I'm collateral damage. I'm musical collateral damage.
Your family or Emily's family? Because I know they're super musical.
They're super musical, but they're more folk song musical.
Okay.
My mother and sisters just love Broadway musicals.
Nice.
Just absolutely. The amount of times I have had to hear when I was growing up, "Bless your beautiful hide," over and over and over and over again. And the number of times I watched Cats, the direct-to-video recording of
the old one.
The number of times that I've had to, I don't know, had to is a strong term. I enjoy a lot of this, just not on the extent that my family does.
Awesome.
But I never saw the weird ones that you and Ben love until I got to college, because my musical theater experience was with what my mother and my sisters love. So they're not watching Sweeney Todd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, I kind of group Broadway into three broad categories, and these are not fair categories at all.
Okay.
But there is the kind of feel-good show, right? Which is the Rodgers and Hammerstein, kind of the classic, you're going to perform this in your high school, that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Then there is the Tired Businessman show, which is Phantom, Les Mis, lots and lots of spectacle. That's kind of, in my sour opinion, where a lot of Broadway has gone over the last couple of decades, is Shrek the Musical. Like, we're bored, let's go see this thing and relax. And
okay.
Yeah. And then there is the weird stuff, the indie stuff, the off-Broadway, the Sondheim that... Sondheim, despite being the absolute beloved godfather of Broadway, most of his shows didn't actually make money on their first run because they're so weird and different. And
so I grew up, as I say, collateral damage. I enjoy a lot of this, but I know them all really well because of this. And I legitimately enjoy theater. I like the live experience. And I can point to a few, like seeing Les Mis for the first time by the New York cast when they were traveling was one of those experiences as a teenager that's eye-opening, that just is like, oh, this is why my family loves this so much. This one really worked for me. And when I was in college, we started taking road trips, and we would go down to San Francisco and go see things. My roommates and I would go down and see Phantom, or we go down and see whatever. Yeah. So I can't just only blame my family. I do have a fondness, but I feel like I have a fondness for what you just described as bored businessmen or tired businessmen.
Love that
musicals.
Tired Businessman musicals. Yeah. And to be clear, there's nothing wrong with any of those categories, right?
Okay.
I will still argue that Shrek the Musical or Seussical or whatever is probably too far over the line for me personally, but that doesn't mean that it is inherently bad art.
I would say that there's something else there that was started off by the blockbuster smash success of the 80s and 90s rock musical-ish, modern musical.
Yeah.
The Phantoms, the Les Mis, to a lesser extent, Lion King. We're taking something beloved and well-known and doing a musical adaptation of it that has name recognition attached.
Yeah.
And that's maybe your category, but it's that name recognition that I think is driving those.
And you say to lesser extent Lion King, but really what was going on behind the scenes, there were the huge shows. Chorus Line ran forever and made it bajillion dollars. Cats then did the same thing. Phantom Les Mis, they came in. But it was Disney moving in with Beauty and the Beast and Lion King that brought big corporate money to Broadway that had never been there before.
Right.
And so that, more than anything else, I think is what has created modern blockbuster mentality in musicals.
I think it happened all through media, but it's fun to see it happening here because it seems very clear to me. It happened in epic fantasy too.
Yeah.
I don't know if you realize this, but epic fantasy novels, this was a pulp genre until Tolkien. Tolkien came about, and still when Tolkien was publishing, it was pulp, but it was selling bestseller numbers. And the whole industry's like, what's going on? Why are things selling bestseller numbers in this little niche genre? And that's where the epic fantasy genre came from, and why I have a career, and why Robert Jordan had a career, is that big money in publishing said, wow, people want to read this. We'll invest real money into making high-class, expensive, lavish productions, big hardcovers, and we will push them very hard with a lot of marketing budget. And lo and behold, they became blockbusters.
Yeah. Well, and you do make a good point that it is during the 80s and 90s is kind of when that mentality went everywhere, right? That's when...
That's Jaws, that's Star Wars.
Yeah. But then to even... you can point to the early 2000s. That's when people started, camping out for book launches with Harry Potter and Twilight and things like that. So, yeah. Anyway, before we get too deep into this...
Oh, we're backing up.
We need a food heist.
Oh, okay, we do. I was wondering if we were going to have a food heist.
We do have a food heist. A few episodes ago, we wondered if there were any historical food heists. And I have been sent a great many historical food heists.
So for the next year, we're going to be dipping into this well?
Not quite that many. I'm going to combine a few of them tonight and talk about coffee. You ready for this? So coffee, the actual original coffee plant, actually comes from Yemen.
Okay.
And coffee was exclusively a Yemeni product for quite a long time.
Okay.
And then, eventually sold, smuggled out. This is where we get the heist side of it. There's actually multiple coffee heists where coffee was such a popular and such a lucrative product that everybody wanted it. So there's a series of thefts. There was a Dutch guy, and I don't actually have his name, who first smuggled coffee out of Yemen, and the original city where they sold it was called Mocha. That's where we get our word Mocha. That's a Yemeni city.
Was Yemen was it a country then, an independent country? Was it part of like the Ottoman Empire? Was it part of Saudi Arabia?
This was the 1600s.
Okay, so this is pre-Ottoman Empire.
Yeah,
so this
pre-Ottoman Empire. It was kind of its own thing. And I actually, there's a really fascinating book called The Monk of Mocha by Dave Eggers. If anyone out there really wants to read about the history of Yemeni coffee, it's spectacular. But so this guy smuggled coffee out of there. And then in the 1700s, this Dutch guy had like the absolute monopoly on coffee. But then King Louis XIV managed to get...
Is that Sun King Louis? The Sun King?
The Sun King?
Yeah. That's Louis XIV, right? Am I right?
I don't... What? I've never heard this label for
the
King
Sun
Louis.
King, the big extravagant, France is doing really well. This is the era of the Man in the Iron Mask, King Louis type. The build Versailles and spend all the money and dance around in hose. And this
might be one generation before that, because French Revolution is still like 70 years off, 70 or 80 years off. But yes.
Yeah. Oh, Sun King. 14th is Sun King. Okay.
Sun King. Yeah. So he managed to get 2 of those Dutch coffee plants. But then one of his naval officers, a guy named Gabriel de Clue, he stole some of those coffee plants, some cuttings. He kept them alive on a voyage to the New World.
Wow.
And he started growing coffee over in the New World and in the Caribbean.
Can I say how much I love that you pronounced his first name with a Spanish accent and then shifted to French for the second for his last name?
Yeah, I don't know how to say Gabriel in a French accent. I don't know how to say Declue in a French accent either, as long as we're talking about my terrible French accent.
So he went to America.
He went to America. He started basically a bunch of Caribbean colonies, French and Dutch colonies, then had, again, the now shared monopoly on coffee.
Okay.
But this is where we get into the last and, in my opinion, the most exciting of the food heists. Because in 1727, French Guiana, right on the border of Brazil, somehow coffee showed up in Brazil in huge numbers. Today, Brazil is the largest coffee producer in the world by like double any other competitor or more. More coffee is grown in Brazil, and nobody for 200 years knew how it got there because it had been so carefully controlled and so, tightly monitored. Turns out that there was a Brazilian captain whose name is, and I'm not going to say this right, João Rodrigues Palheta. He disguised himself as a diplomat, sneaked his way into French Guiana, allegedly seduced the wife of the governor, and managed to come back with 1,000 coffee beans and 4 seedlings.
Okay, is that what the book, the King of Mocha or whatever?
No, that one's all about Brazil. About Yemen.
Okay.
This one...
is there a book about this person?
There needs to be.
Like
I was sent an article by a guy named Felipe Bueno. Thank you very much. The article was entirely in Portuguese, so I did not read it, but I have done other research. But yeah, this is the cool story. The guy who sneaked across the border in disguise, seduced the lady, stole some coffee, and then changed the entire history of world coffee imports and exports. So there's our historical food heist for today.
You can feel very elevated listening to this podcast now because rather than it just being trivia, it's now history.
It's historical.
Yes. And so...
Trivia that happened like 200 years ago counts as academia.
Yes.
So, but anyway, nobody knew anything about this guy or what he had done until the 1920s. When some historians finally uncovered how did Brazil get all this coffee. They had kept it secret for 200 years.
Someone should write a musical about him.
Yes.
There you go.
I love it. A musical about the Brazilian coffee heist in
that was my
1727.
Segue to get us back.
To get us back into musicals.
Right back in.
So we're right back in, and we're talking about musicals. All right, well, then I have to ask, do you have a favorite musical or a favorite musical creator?
So I can point to 2 that I just really, really like.
Okay.
One was Les Mis, as I mentioned before. I've now seen it many times. I still just absolutely love it. Okay. Les Miserables. Now, it led me to read Les Miserables, which became one of my favorite books.
Same.
So... yeah.
I read the book after watching the show. Now, I do want to ask you, though. You said you saw a touring company do it. My experience with finally, after years of loving the soundtrack, seeing Les Mis live was, oh, that's it? Like, I had already seen Les Mis in concert on PBS and all of that kind of stuff, where they just kind of stand there and sing. And I was so excited to go to a theater where they would be moving around and singing, and they didn't. Maybe it was just the traveling company that came to Salt Lake City, but they pretty much just kind of stood there and sang. It was like watching the concert version on PBS, except there was a set in the background.
I mean, the big thing about Les Mis, and this is when I saw it, this is what drew all the attention. It's this blockbuster thing. It really kind of dovetails into what we're talking about. Is I'm sure it wasn't the first, but it was the first big popular musical that used the spinning stage. Yeah, where you're walking on the stage and new scenery is coming to the character as they're moving on the stage.
And the big barricade,
and then the barricade, the transforming barricade, and those sorts of things weren't really done in the pre-Phantom era. Obviously, Phantom had done things like this before. We were used to the Pirates of Penzance or Fiddler on the Roof, where you would do setting, but the setting was not nearly the production, the extravaganza.
Yeah.
And I saw Les Mis again a couple years ago in London.
Mm-hmm.
And I did notice, I'm like, now that I've spent the last 25 years or whatever seeing big budget Broadway productions, it no longer wows. The moving stage and things like this, it now feels a little quaint.
Yeah.
But that, I think, is the sort of, what do you call it? The John Carter of Mars syndrome, where the first thing that does something and then gets copied a whole bunch of times, if you go see the first thing, if it's your, you go back to it, you're like, what's the big deal? Well, everybody copied this.
Everybody copied it, so it isn't cool anymore.
Yeah.
We do need to give credit to Cameron Mcintosh. He is a British producer who was the primary producer of Phantom and Les Mis, and he kind of kicked off this whole big sensational thing that you're talking about. All of those early shows that did that and set the pattern were Mcintosh shows.
Well, it was spectacular when I saw it as a teenager. And then the other one is not based on the set at all. It's Joseph in the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. I just love that musical for reasons that it's hard to elucidate. I like the musical variety to it. I like the sincere songs. I think are really pretty. I like that it has the religious undertone to it. But it's picking a story that you can also make fun of at the same time without being too terribly blasphemous, so it feels a little transgressive at the same time. All of that together made me really just love Joseph, and I'll see Joseph anytime that I have an opportunity to do so.
That's cool. Well, and now this is the part where I have to ask, because I have done, personally, a ton of theater, including I've been in 3 productions of Joseph. Have you ever been in a musical?
No.
Or been in the pit for a musical?
Nope. I would find that miserable.
Because I know you don't like singing in choirs either.
We talked about this. Doing the same thing over and over again and not leaving my mind free to explore stories is just pure misery to me. Even being in a band was kind of hard on me for that reason. And so going and doing the same performance every night over and over again would be torture. That's my personal hell. If you lock me in hell, you're going to put me in a play, and I have to do the same thing over and over again.
That would be great. Give you like 2 lines.
Yeah.
No, more than that.
No,
you need to have enough lines that you can't
I have to
check
be
out
in the chorus.
And be in the background.
Yeah. I have to be always on a cue, thinking about my next thing. You've got to. You can't let my brain be free to work on something fun. I totally respect theater folks, but I do not understand you at all. You baffle me. You're strange creatures.
That's funny.
Now, you studied theater in school, you said.
Yes, I did. I actually did, again, going back to my Sondheim fascination, both for my big capstone project of my college credit program in high school, and then again in college, studied Sondheim specifically academically. And so I'm a big, not only am I a nerd for the indie musicals, but I can say that I've studied it at a collegiate level, so I'm like an obnoxious nerd about it. But yes.
So what are your favorites?
My favorites? I like to say that Sunday in the Park with George is my favorite, but really my favorite is Company.
Okay.
Company is one of his I think his very first Broadway production in which he got to do music and lyrics both. He did lyrics only for West Side Story and for Gypsy. Gypsy is one of my other favorites. I will put Gypsy up against any other show for, in my opinion, just the single best Broadway score that's ever been written. And that was not Sondheim, that was Julie Stein. But absolutely love that. I was in that one too. I've been in a lot of shows. But yeah, I'm going to say I love Gypsy. I love Company. I did I ever make you watch Sweeney Todd?
Well, you didn't make me, but I had never seen it. And you and Ben were aghast by this, and so you guys showed me the Angela Lansbury Sweeney Todd.
Angela
It was my
Lansbury,
first
George Horne.
Sweeney Todd. Yeah.
Which I still will try to pull out every Halloween and make my kids watch.
Because you are a strange, morbid person.
Yes.
Yeah. I like Sweeney Todd, but it is not my kind of show. I prefer Into the Woods. Just because the narrative twists that Into the Woods pulls work better for me, and the morbidity works better for me, if that makes sense.
No, that does. And, I said earlier that very few of Sondheim's shows actually ever made money on their first run. The two that did were A Little Night Music and Into the Woods, which is incredibly broadly accessible, and everybody loves it, and I like it a lot. I even like the movie of it. Which I did not expect to, because they changed a lot and they took out my favorite character and they wiggled all kinds of things around. But in the end, I think they did a pretty good job. So, hooray for that.
Yes. Be careful Googling images of original productions of Into the Woods. The wolf in particular.
Oh, the wolf.
Yes.
They have an anatomically correct wolf.
Yes, they do.
Yeah. I should say another show that I love a lot, and that I actually was also in a college production. If I'm going to pick my 3 favorite musicals, it's going to be Gypsy, Company, and Little Shop of Horrors.
Okay, I could have guessed that. I do like Little Shop of Horrors a lot.
Yeah.
It is great. Not just my fondness is increased by our mutual friend Mary Robinette being a puppeteer and talking about doing Little Shop of Horrors and things like that.
She has puppeteered Audrey 2 in at least 2 different productions that I'm aware of.
Hurt her hand really badly in one of them. But I experienced that through the movie first, the one with Steve Martin as the dentist.
Same.
But then got to see it live, and it's even more charming live.
Yeah, very different. Well, and it has the original ending usually when they do it
Yes.
live. Every year on the Writing Excuses cruise, which we talked about before, we're doing that this year in September, and you can sign up for it. We always do a karaoke night. And Mary Robinette and I have talked in the past about trying to do like the Feed Me duet or something like that.
Right.
But my wife and I, our go-to song whenever we need to perform is Suddenly Seymour.
Okay. I basically have never done karaoke.
Yeah. Well, that does not surprise me in the least tiny bit.
They did force me, my wife, under pressure, to go up and one time at Jordan Con, and they recorded this. I don't know why. I am awful at this, but to do the chant from Enter Sandman.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I did only the chant. I don't know if you're familiar with Metallica's Enter Sandman, but
I am,
yeah.
That's awesome.
But yeah. So what was the first one that you can remember like going to, the first musical?
First musical that I saw in person.
In person.
Boy, that is hard to say. I probably am going to say Charlie Brown. You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown.
Okay.
Just because my ward, our church, did a little production of it, and my dad was Linus.
Okay.
But both my parents are very musical people. And so we saw a lot of shows as kids. I remember seeing Music Man and Fiddler on the Roof in little community productions. I remember going to...
Music Man is my first that I can remember seeing. Community production, I remember sitting outside on a hill in Idaho over the summer because I was visiting my grandparents and watching Music Man. And I don't even know where it was, but I remember being there.
Some outdoor amphitheater somewhere.
And I remembered it because in grade school, we had music class where we basically singing time, right, for second graders. I don't know if they do that anymore.
I think so.
And most of what we did was show tunes. And so I knew the music to Music Man, not knowing really it was from a play.
That it was from a show.
And then the show, and I'm like, hey, I actually know these songs.
That's awesome.
And that was part of what made me remember it. So I'm fond of Music Man to this day. In fact, we're going to try to go see Hugh Jackman He's
Oh yeah,
he's
it's gonna be good.
he's doing Music Man on Broadway right now, and so
That's cool.
see if I can sneak out there and see Music
The
Man.
Hugh Jackman Oklahoma is so good.
I didn't see Oklahoma until like
Oh,
2 or 3 years ago.
man.
That is a terrible, dumb show.
Well, did you see the Hugh Jackman
I
one?
didn't see the Hugh Jackman one.
Because when you see it, this is what I talked about as like the classic feel-good category of shows, right?
Feel good. They don't they bully a person into committing suicide?
Yes, they do. But that's because the show is always presented as this very like, let's have a hoedown kind of a show.
Yeah.
And then when Hugh Jackman did his, they drew out all the super dark themes of it. And the song Poor Judd is Dead and things like that, where he tries to convince him to kill himself. Like, he went full dark on it.
Okay.
And it was really,
good?
really cool.
Well, that's I actually had never seen Oklahoma, and I'm like, oh, it's one of these classics like Fiddler on the Roof. And when I saw Fiddler on the Roof for the first time, I was blown away. Like, I'd always heard the music. Now I watch the play, and I'm like, this is touching and poignant and well written and interesting. And I was expecting Oklahoma, and instead, I got something kind of weird and kind of dumb. Sorry for those who love Oklahoma. I did not like Oklahoma.
You know, I don't think a lot of people truly in their hearts love Oklahoma. My favorite Rodgers and Hammerstein is Carousel,
Okay.
which is very similar, but again, goes very dark. It's based on I want to say a Hungarian play. It's called Lilium. It's very dark. The ending of it is often changed in modern productions because it kind of excuses domestic abuse.
Yeah. There's a whole bunch of that stuff. Like, you know,
Yeah.
I hadn't seen Guys and Dolls for a while, and then I saw that. I'm like, okay, I don't hate it, but
what about this? But let's go back to Fiddler.
Yeah.
Fiddler on the Roof is, I think, one of the all-time pillars of Broadway musicals. My favorite story about Fiddler on the Roof there's a documentary about this that I can't remember if it was on Netflix or on Amazon, but anyway, you can go watch this. And they were talking about how the show's incredibly popular in Japan. And one of the original creators went to go see this Japanese production, and they, of course, the director was hosting him and everything, and somebody came up to him, and I can't remember if it was one of the stars or one of the directors or what, and said, "So you do this show in America?" And he's like, "Yeah, we do. Why?" He said, "They understand it?" He was like, "Of course they understand it." And he said, "Why? It's so Japanese." And the themes of being bound by tradition and being forced into these patterns, and the conflict between tradition and family and love and freedom came out of these Jewish communities, but also resonated so strongly with Japanese that they consider it a Japanese show, which I think is delightful. And
that's awesome.
Such a great sign of how art can reach across cultures that way.
Do you know who made Fiddler on the Roof? I'm not even like, is this a one-hit wonder playwright? Or is this...
I cannot remember the names. It was, people who had been around in theater for a while. They never had another hit that big. But yeah, so I guess you could call it a one-hit wonder, but that kind of...
That's a dismissive term that is not... Yeah.
They absolutely had long careers doing other things and working in theater, but never with the kind of breakout cultural touchstone that was Fiddler on the Roof.
So you mentioned earlier several times Rodgers and Hammerstein. My first date with Emily was to go see HMS Pinafore.
Oh, which is not Rodgers
and
Hammerstein.
Oh, no, that's Gilbert and Sullivan. Okay, never mind.
The light opera is from London.
Okay.
Which I also love. And
so Gilbert and Sullivan is also Pirates then?
Pirates of Penzance, HMS Pinafore, the Mikado, that sort of thing.
So that was my... So what do you think of Gilbert and Sullivan then?
I am a big fan of Gilbert and Sullivan. I don't know if you can actually point to it like evolutionarily, but they definitely were one of the first to kind of cross the line from pure dance or pure play or pure opera into this modern musical theater thing.
Yeah.
What they were doing, they call it light opera or operetta. and I really love them. I grew up watching, the Mikado and things like that. I wish that it were possible to do the Mikado without being horribly racially insensitive.
I have no idea what the Mikado is.
The Mikado is them, and in my opinion, it is their best work, but it is so hard to watch today because it is a story about Japanese culture from two people who knew essentially nothing about Japanese culture.
Okay.
And so the story they are telling is kind of terrible and often very offensive. But the music and the lyrics that they use to tell it is, a musician, a composer, a librettist at the absolute height of their skill, pointing all of that power in an absolutely appropriative direction.
Is it, so I've seen, I'm not sure if I've seen any other Gilbert and Sullivan, because I've seen those two, HMS Pinafore and Pirates of Penzance, both of which are partially comedies. Like they
all of their stuff is very comedic.
But not just comedic, it's making fun of itself. Like HMS Pinafore seems like it's a parody almost of a genre that I haven't seen. And then Pirates is a parody of HMS Pinafore or vice versa or something like that. Right?
And that's a very accurate reading of them. Really what they were doing is they were doing satires of their own culture. HMS Pinafore and to lesser extent Pirates are direct satires against the peerage system that they all were living under and mocking. And you could kind of point to Mikado as mocking the same thing. They were basically making fun of all of the hoity-toity rich London people who came to see their shows without them necessarily knowing that that's what was going on. But yeah.
So, Andrew Lloyd Webber. We haven't gotten an opinion from you.
Okay.
You've mentioned several plays, but no discussion of what you think.
Andrew Lloyd Webber, like I said, I've been in Joseph 3 times. I have been peripherally involved with some other Webber productions. I'm not a huge fan. He is, as I said in the beginning, I group him into the tired businessman shows that are spectacle over substance. And I don't really love his Phantom of the Opera. I don't really love Cats. There are a couple songs from every show. Like I put together in high school my little mixtape that was, here's all the Webber songs that I actually really like. And it had Starlight Express and it had all these weird, goofy things on it. And, a couple from Phantom and a couple from Cats. But
see, I'm going to argue against the fact that you could do that. I find most musicals don't have one. And I find that Andrew Lloyd Webber musicals often have several. And Joseph, it's like the whole soundtrack for me.
Yeah.
And so I would argue that this is maybe a little bit of hipsterism from Dan, because every one of his plays that I know has at least one great song and several good songs.
Oh, yeah. Without a doubt.
And, name me great songs. We could go down the list of the Tony, and I could name off a bunch of musicals where you can't name one great song, I'm going to bet.
I would be interested to take that test. Yes, I'm absolutely being kind of snobby about Andrew Lloyd Webber, and I recognize that and I admit to it. I do think that he is a better musician than he is a storyteller, which is why I often tend to consume him in mixtapes and playlists rather than entire shows together.
I would not dispute that comment.
That said, my absolute favorite Webber and one of my very favorite musicals is Evita.
And that is excellent.
That is one that I will watch all the way through. I absolutely adore the Antonio Banderas Madonna movie that was made. I consider it one of the all-time great movie musicals.
See, how many people who write music for musicals can you point to and say they made one of the all-time greats?
They made one of the all-time greats. Very few. Very few. I will, and you said that your first date with Emily was Pinafore.
Yes.
I actually proposed to my wife after watching Evita.
Oh, nice.
So, while we're talking about movie musicals, let's break into those a little bit.
Okay, yeah.
Because there's a lot of really obvious ones, like, well, they made a movie out of Fiddler on the Roof or out of Evita, things like that. But there's also a lot of Hollywood native stuff, like Singin' in the Rain.
Yeah.
Which I would pick that one as the greatest movie musical.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
I don't know. Little Shop of Horrors is pretty
Little Shop of Horrors
darn
is
good.
right up there.
I don't think any of the Les Mises I've seen have managed.
No.
And the Tom Hooper one I don't really like that much.
Is that the Hugh Jackman,
Yeah.
Anne Hathaway?
Mhm.
Yeah, his. We could talk at length about all of the things he did wrong.
We're going to, because have you seen the Cats movie?
I have not seen his
I
Cats.
saw his Cats last week, and I warned Dan.
My word.
We're gonna. I told Dan I'm going to make him do an entire episode on Cats.
Yeah.
But I said let's talk about musicals before, so you can anticipate. I have thoughts.
Yeah.
Cats was amazing. Cats was amazing. Amazing.
Okay. I'm
not going to say anything more about that. I'm just
Okay.
going to say it was amazing.
I will say I am excited to talk about all the ways in which Hooper does not know how to direct musicals at all. But
Cats is so amazing.
and I don't even know if you're trolling or not.
I'm not trolling. Cats is amazing.
Cats is amazing.
Cats is
Okay.
mesmerizing.
You
Cats
heard it here first, folks.
is one of the best movie-going experiences I have had in years.
Gosh, this is what happens when we let a person who loves Speed Racer see more movies.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Cats is, I can't even think of a movie more widely despised than Cats.
That's because people are just not going to it for the right
just
reasons.
Not going for the right reasons.
Okay, we have to sideboard that.
Okay,
Go
we
ahead.
will sideboard that. We'll go back to Cats. Let's go back to movie musicals. One that a lot of people don't consider to be a musical, but I think checks every single box and hits it out of the park is Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Not a musical in the way that Singin' in the Rain is a musical.
So you're letting So I thought you were saying we have to talk about. We should do an entire separate episode on this. I thought you were talking about stage to movie.
No,
that's what I thought you were.
Well, that's
talking
why
about.
I said there's Hollywood native stuff.
Hollywood native. Okay, I get what you're saying.
The Fred Astaire and the Gene Kelly and the Danny Kaye.
And I didn't know Singin' in the Rain was not a play first, because I saw it as a play before I saw the movie.
Yeah. No, it was
not.
It was
Okay.
a movie. In fact, one of the things that they did a lot during this period is they would just take somebody like Irving Berlin and collect a bunch of their songs and string them together and form a story around them. So they were songs that everybody already knew, in part.
Jukebox musicals is what they call
very
that.
jukebox musical. The way that they turned Mamma Mia into musicals and movies and things like that.
We're gonna sidebar that because we are out of time.
Okay.
Do we want to talk about Cats next time?
Let's absolutely talk about Cats next time.
Cats next time. How's that, Ben?